You know what's funny about getting older? The things you thought would stick, they fade. The pyro, the arenas, the pay-per-view numbers, the championships. People ask me about the streak. People ask me about Cena, about The Rock, about every big match I ever had. And honestly, that's never the first thing that comes to me. Not anymore. When I'm back on my farm in Meade, South Dakota, before sunrise, before the world wakes up, 5 names come to my mind faster than any of those matches. Not the loudest names, not always the most famous ones, but the 5 people who made Brock Lesnar possible. The first person I want to talk about is Paul Heyman. When I first walked into WWE in 2002, I was 24 years old, 290 pounds, and I didn't need anybody to tell me I was dangerous. I knew what I was physically. What I didn't know was how to make other people feel it. I thought the body said everything. Paul walked up to me and said, "You're right, the body says everything, but I'll make sure the world is listening first." At first, I didn't know what to make of that. I'm not a man who trusts easy. I grew up on a dairy farm. You trust the ground, the weather, the animals, people. That takes longer. The thing people never understood about Paul is what he absorbed from me. Every interview, every confrontation, every moment the industry wanted a target, Paul stepped in front of it. He carried a reputation in this business that most men would have buckled under. They called him a manipulator, a snake, a man who used people, and he never once defended himself to those people because he was too busy working. I watched that. That meant something to me. I remember SummerSlam 2002 when I beat The Rock for the Undisputed Championship. I was the youngest WWE champion in history at that point. And I remember standing in the gorilla position backstage, the noise from the crowd bleeding through the curtain, and Paul leaning in and saying, "Don't you dare celebrate in there until you know you've taken everything he had." Not win the match, take everything he has. That's a different instruction. That's intelligence. Paul didn't just manage me, he translated me. There were things inside that body, that anger, that isolation, that farm boy silence that I didn't have words for. He had words for all of it, and he never needed credit for any of it. When I think about Paul Heyman today, I think about intelligence, the kind that never needed a spotlight to prove it was real. When I got to WWE, I was told Kurt Angle was the standard. I didn't want to hear that. I don't like being measured against anybody. But then I stepped in the ring with him first time in 2002, leading into SummerSlam, and I understood what they meant. Not because of what he did to me physically, because of how prepared he was. Every sequence, every position, every moment I thought I had him, he was already 2 steps ahead. That's not athleticism. That's discipline built over decades. What the cameras never showed was what Kurt carried inside that ring every night. By the time we worked together, he had been wrestling professionally on a neck that any doctor would have told him to retire with. Cervical stenosis, bone spurs, nerve damage. I knew this. The boys in the back knew. The fans didn't. He never talked about it. He never used it. He just showed up, taped himself together, and performed at a level that made healthy men look ordinary. I remember our Iron Man match at SummerSlam, 2003 60 minutes, one fall at a time. By the halfway point, my body was reminding me of things I usually ignored. And I looked at Kurt across the ring, and his jaw was set the same way it had been at the first bell. Not fading, not adjusting, exactly the same. That image has never left me. Because I realized the standard he set had nothing to do with winning. It had to do with not allowing yourself to shrink. Locker rooms feel the presence of certain people. Kurt never had to say a word. The room calibrated to him. When I think about Kurt Angle today, I think about standard, the bar nobody told you existed until you finally hit it. I was a rookie when I first encountered Mark Calloway. He had been doing this for over a decade already. The streak was already a mythology by then. And you walk into a locker room with a guy like that, you expect a certain kind of weight to come off him, the kind that says, "I have been here longer and you will know it." Mark was never that. Never once. He shook your hand, he looked you in the eye, and he treated you like you belonged there. That surprised me. It took me a while to understand why. Mark had nothing to prove. That was the thing. When you carry a championship for years, you're still chasing the validation that comes with keeping it. Mark had transcended that. He was beyond the outcome. Every time he walked through that curtain, he had already made peace with whatever was going to happen, and that peace translated into something the crowd felt without knowing what they were feeling. They called it presence. I call it fearlessness. After WrestleMania XXX, the night the streak ended, I remember the silence in that arena, 21-0, done. And I walked past him backstage, and his expression was the same as it always was. Not broken, not relieved, present. He looked at me and said, "That's the business." 4 words. Nothing else. I've thought about those 4 words more than most conversations I've had in my life. He gave something away that night that he had built for 21 years, and he did it without flinching. When I think about The Undertaker today, I think about fearlessness. Not the kind you perform in front of 60,000 people, but the kind you carry alone at midnight. I know what people think when they see me. They see the man who ended the streak. They see 22 inches of bicep and a German suplex that broke ribs. They see the farm, the silence, the deliberate absence from the public eye when I wasn't contracted, and people assume that's the whole of it, that there's no quiet underneath. There is. There always was, and Rinna is the only person who ever reached it. I met her when she was Sable, a name this industry made famous before I ever got here. She understood the WWE machine the way very few people do, because she had been inside it long enough to see behind every curtain. She could have used that knowledge to navigate things cynically. She never did. She stayed clear. That kind of clarity in this business is rarer than any championship. What people never saw was the morning after the worst nights, after losses that didn't make sense, after physical breakdowns that I didn't talk about publicly, after decisions about my career that weighed on me in ways I don't have easy words for. Rena didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. She didn't push me toward the next match or the next payday. She was just still. And that stillness from someone who had survived this industry herself meant something that no amount of crowd noise ever matched. I remember the night before I returned to WWE at WrestleMania XX in 2012, sitting at the kitchen table in Minnesota, and what settled me wasn't confidence or adrenaline. It was just her being in the room. When I think about Rena today, I think about calmness, the rarest thing a man like me ever had access to. And the last person I truly loved the most was Vince McMahon. I'll say something that might surprise people. Vince and I do not have a simple relationship. We never did. I left WWE in 2004 to pursue the NFL. I walked away, not on bad terms, but I walked away from the machine that had made me. And there are people in this business who never forgave others for doing that. Vince is not one of those people. When I came back in 2012, he called me personally, not an agent, not a booker, him. What people see on television is a character, the chairman, the authority, the man who struts down the ramp and owns every room he enters. I'm not talking about that man. I'm talking about the man I sat across from in a quiet office in Stamford, Connecticut, when I was 22 years old and had just finished the most dominant debut year in WWE history. He leaned across the desk and said, "I'm going to build this company around you, not around what you can do in the ring, around what you are." I didn't fully understand what he meant until years later. He meant he trusted the animal, not the moveset, not the look, the animal itself. In an industry built on politics, on relationships, on who you aligned yourself with and who owed you what, Vince cut through all of it and made decisions based on something harder to quantify. He believed in things before they were proven. He believed in me when I was still unfinished. And when I left, he didn't close the door. When I came back, he didn't make me earn the trust again. It was there. Like it had been held in a box, waiting. I don't think either of us ever said everything that needed to be said. That's the honest truth. There are things that stayed unspoken between us, the way certain things do between men who respect each other too much to make it sentimental. When I think about Vince McMahon, I think about trust, and I think about how rare it is to find someone who believed in the animal before the animal knew what it was. The older I get, the more I understand what disappears. And I mean, really disappears, not fades, not dims, but goes completely. The ratings conversations are gone. The debates about who should have held the title, for how long, in which city, against which opponent gone. The backstage politics that felt like life and death at the time, the creative disagreements that had grown men raising their voices in hallways at midnight dissolved like they were written in water. The pay-per-view buy rates that people argued about like they were sacred texts. The headlines after every major event, the dirt sheets, the online forums that dissected every promo, every match, every handshake, all of it gone. Even the matches themselves, and I say this as a man whose career was built inside that ring, even those blur, eventually the specific sequences disappear. The exact holds. The near falls that had arenas screaming, they compress into something more like feeling than memory. I can tell you I had an Iron Man match with Kurt Angle at SummerSlam 2003 that lasted 60 minutes. But I cannot tell you the order of every fall. What I can tell you is how my body felt in the 35th minute, the specific weight of my own arms, the particular silence inside my own head when I stopped thinking and just competed. That's what stays, not the score, the feeling underneath the score. I think about what this business takes from people, the knees, the necks, the relationships that didn't survive the schedule, the years spent in rental cars between cities that blur together, eating whatever was still open at 1 in the morning, sleeping in hotels that all had the same carpet. I think about what men gave to this industry quietly, without ceremony, without anyone stopping to acknowledge the cost, the things that were surrendered that never showed up in a contract. And then I think about what's left on the other side of all that. A man in a cheap suit who stood in front of every microphone so I wouldn't have to. A locker room that calibrated itself to the presence of one man who never raised his voice. A handshake backstage at midnight from someone who had just given away 21 years of mythology without blinking. A kitchen table in Minnesota where the world slowed down enough to breathe. And a phone call from a man who didn't have to call, who called anyway and meant every word. That's what's left. 5 people, 5 things I cannot explain with statistics or highlight reels or championship histories. That's why these 5 names mean something deeper than any title I ever held, deeper than any crowd I ever walked into, deeper than anything this business put my name on. The noise was real, but it was never the point. Paul Heyman brought intelligence, the kind that works in the dark, that carries what you can't carry alone. Kurt Angle brought standard, the invisible bar that every man in that locker room quietly measured himself against. The Undertaker brought fearlessness, not perform, not packaged, just present in everything he did. Rena brought calmness, the steadiest thing I ever stood next to. And Vince McMahon brought trust, early, unconditional, and without an expiration date. What made those years in WWE matter wasn't the pyro or the crowds or the pay-per-view moments. It was the fact that 5 people showed up for the work, for the machine, for each other, and they never asked for anything back that they hadn't earned first. That's not talent. That's character. And character is the thing that outlasts all of it. Every morning I'm back on that farm before sunrise, and I'm not thinking about championships. I'm thinking about the people who made me worth watching. Championships rust, names don't. If you stripped everything away, the lights, the pyro, the crowd, who are the 5 people you'd still show up for?